Buongiorno, happy Friday, and welcome back to another podcast episode with the Greystone Manor. Today's episode's actually a little special because I've convinced my business partner to join me. They helped write some of the staple articles in Fox and Toad magazine, such as Of Cinnamon and Clove, Simmer Pots, Breaking the Mold, Being Trans and Non-Binary in Sacred Spaces, Summertime Red Flags, Predators of Paganism, and Betwixt the Gravestones, Cemetery Etiquette. So, welcome, Atticus. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hello, hello. And you didn't have to twist my arm that hard to join you on your podcasting endeavor. I'm more than happy to join in and participate.
Perfect. I'm so appreciative of it. I've been tossing around a lot of podcast ideas in my head, and sometimes I get stuck on what to actually do. But I actually wrote questions for you.
All right. Yeah, let's go.
First one is, what made you say yes to helping me out on this small passion project in quotations?
uh to be quite honest, my saying yes had a lot to do with how we initially met. I For some context, I was managing a local metaphysical store, and uh, you came in as a customer to the store, and I was actually talking to some other customers, and the topic of Dungeons and Dragons came up. We were talking about it. You overheard and you popped in. I don't remember exactly what you said, but you were like, "Are you guys talking about Dungeons and Dragons?" And it was like, "Hex, yeah, we are." And then you did the proverbial neurodivergent stance, and then I did it in response. And from that moment, I knew that we were going to be friends. And I also had, I know this might sound really cheesy, but had a little voice in my head that said, "Follow this person, participate
Oh,
with this person. This person is a good being. Let's go. Let's follow along this train and listen to that." So it's basically very much a listen to your heart kind of experience. So when you asked me, I was like, "Yep, absolutely, no questions asked."
First of all, I'm like grinning ear to ear. Like, that's amazing to hear. I'm also so glad that you understood the call and the response when it
Yes.
came to the awkward T posing that I gave you.
Oh yeah, and it wasn't awkward at all. It was like, yes, this is a person like I am. We this is our special, it's our like, it's our friendship ritual. You know how
Yes.
some
Oh
some
my
people joke
gosh.
about like mating rituals, and like, it's the friendship ritual. You have to get into the T-pose stance. You got to make a weird little goblin face, and if
Yes.
that person
Oh
doesn't
my
make it in
gosh.
response, then they're not meant for you. So
Exactly. So, for future reference, that's how all people can find their people. Just
just
saying.
make little weird dancey faces at them.
I totally agree. So then I guess next would be, how did the inspiration hit you for writing these topics? Because some of them are pretty in depth and I really like them.
I have this thing where I like to talk about my hyperfixations, my neurodivergent hyperfixations, especially things having to do with witchcraft, the metaphysical, energy, the paranormal. That's directly down my alley. So, because of the fact that I have such a full cauldron, to use the
Love that
witchy analogy,
terminology.
I have such a full cauldron of hyperfixations that tend to relate to the general vibe of Fox and Toad. It helps me narrow it down based off of the season. Okay, what's going on right now? How do I feel right now? And that tells me. The other thing that gives me inspiration of what to write is, genuinely, if I see something come up on social media that in my opinion, I might disagree with. I might have a differing opinion. Everybody's allowed them, like, the thing about metaphysical practice in general is the only way you can do something wrong is if you're harming another person,
I agree.
intentionally
I
harming another
agree.
person. So, like, I spend a lot of time on social media, and I'll see a lot of stuff come up that I'm like, I have context for that. I want to talk. That's the thing I want to talk about more. And so yeah, that's usually how I get my topics to write.
So then, do you have one favorite article that you've written so far?
So it's a tie. I think The one that will always hold a dear place in my heart is um, I always forget the title of it, but the one where I'm talking about being non-binary
Oh yeah,
in
breaking the mold.
yeah,
Yeah,
breaking the
breaking
mold.
the mold.
Breaking the mold will probably always be one of my favorite, if not my favorite, because of the fact that Fox and Toad allowed me the space to be able to speak freely about a topic that is literally my journey in metaphysics and in witchcraft in general, but it allows me to speak from the lens of a non-binary practitioner. Because for those who may not know, I'm a non-binary trans person. My pronouns are they them, and currently in pagan spaces and witchcraft spaces and Wiccan spaces, especially over the past 5 or 6 years, it's been a huge topic of discussion. There have been a lot of rifts in a lot of different communities when it comes to trans acceptance, or
Yes.
what's called gender essentialism. And I talk about it a lot in Breaking the Mold, and I get to break it down and I get to define some terms that might have confused people. So it's like it's an educational resource, but it was also a place where I could speak freely about something that I have experienced a lot of hurt from, and talking about it has been healing for me. And the other one that is my other like neck and neck favorite with Breaking the Mold is cemetery etiquette,
Oh
betwixt
yes.
the gravestone cemetery etiquette.
Yes.
And that's because I spent a lot of time in cemeteries, and in our current modern time, I don't think there's enough conversation around how to be respectful in a cemetery from a metaphysical perspective. um in general, like, you should always be respectful in a cemetery or in a graveyard, but like, it gave me the opportunity to really expound on that and really like bring it into a more modern experience of how to interact with
Oh,
cemeteries and graveyards.
yeah, those are actually two of my favorite articles that you wrote because breaking the mold, being trans and non-binary in sacred space. My dad read that article and actually started to understand why I identify as being non-binary and how I choose they them pronouns.
Yeah.
So that was actually like a beautiful segue point, and the fact that it was in spring, it was just in time before Pride.
Yep.
And this is my first time going to Pride, so it was way more, it was a lot easier for me to step into that when it came to my own personal practice. And also, it helped bridge the gap between my father and I. And then the second one, Betwixt the Gravestones, my mother just started recently getting into the metaphysical and the spiritual
Mm-hmm.
realm of things. She's still a little bit on the love and light thing, but she loved that article. And I'm very surprised, and she's very love and light. That one kind of comes across a little bit darker, but I
Mm-hmm.
really love how it's based in respect.
Right. Well, the thing about it being quote unquote darker, it's that there's this stigma and this, cultural experience around cemeteries and graveyards, because it is a place of veneration for the dead. It's a place of resting, and because death is such a it's a part of who we are. You would think, especially as practitioners, a lot of people who do operate more in metaphysics that are associated with the light and the gentler, and I'm not meaning that in any way. Everybody believe and feel and believe and follow your heart and wherever it takes you.
Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
It's important with that article in particular, the fact that I didn't, like, yes, we kind of edited it so it looks darker and it's like spookier, but at the end of the day, the verbiage in and of itself, it's breaking through when it comes to like the fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have anything to be afraid of.
Exactly.
So
It definitely was very comforting to know that I can go into a graveyard, a cemetery, or a memorial and still feel connected to those who have passed
yeah,
on.
exactly.
So I appreciate that so much. And it's really nice to know that even my own mother's taking interest in that, because now it bridges a gap of conversation that we never had before into something like completely new.
Oh yeah.
Um, which, speaking of conversations, do you have any articles that you might want to share that you have coming up for 2025?
Ooh. um Well, I know that the summertime red flags, I think I'm going to do that yearly.
Oh, nice.
I
Nice.
Because of the fact that when it comes to metaphysical and witchcraft practices, spiritual practices in general, for those practices to continue, they have to evolve, right? So
Mm.
we're always in an ever changing and ever growing experience in society and our cultures and everything like that. So, because of that, I think that I want to keep summertime red flags as a regular like summertime feature with the updates,
I love that.
because I think I kept it to 9, but there are so many. There are so many, especially in a time where social media is so ingrained in so much of what we do and how we interact and how we move about throughout our day, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that it's a feature that I want to continue on. And then a little bit of a sneak peek.
Oh,
I
yes.
am going to be doing a regular series on the Wheel of the Year, which is the modern neo-pagan holiday celebrations of what are called the 8 Sabbaths. So I'm going to be doing a regular feature of sprinklings of the history with some suggestions on how to practice them.
Oh, I, I'm over here like going, yes, like cheering this on because I am so ready to read all of this stuff that you have to put out. But I really love the idea that summer red time, red flags.
Hmm.
I think that's great because I've been noticing a massive trend in social media going towards spirituality
Hmm.
and not based in any type of religion, but just being spiritual in general, talking about spirit guides, the universe. And I really do think that the major shift is kind of going on with
Oh yeah.
our collective, and a lot of people are seeking out that information and knowledge. So I think it's really good and healthy to actually add updates to something like that.
Oh, for sure. We like we operate in a constant ebb and flow when it comes to people seeking out spiritual practice. So unfortunately, the more horror and the more difficulties that occur around us, especially on large scales like natural disasters and everything like that, when we have large masses of loss of life, that tends to trigger these waves of people that seek out specifically the spiritual or the metaphysical or the holistic. Not to mention the fact that, and this isn't me, I am not saying anything, I'm not bashing any religion, this is just a fact that people are leaving the church in droves.
Yes. Oh, I've seen that.
There
Yeah.
are more and more people that are leaving the church and they're seeking other, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to be seeing a lot more of that. So the summertime red flags is a really good opportunity for people to like keep an eye out for certain things, because as beautiful as spiritual practice is,
Mm.
your safety should always be paramount, because unfortunately there are scammers everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I've been scammed a few times by chat GDP or a
GTP, yeah.
GTP. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been scammed by them by thinking it's an actual person
I don't know.
responding to me, and
Yeah.
it's not.
Oh yeah,
So
no.
I'm glad that you're putting out these because my hyper and happy energy does not always pick up on all of
That
that.
just actually gave me an idea for an article. Thank you.
Oh yes, okay. Make sure you write that down.
Yeah.
Which that actually reminds me. How are you writing these articles season to season? Because I know for myself, when I had to write some of the fall articles in 90-degree weather, I struggled majorly. I had to turn up the AC to like 60 degrees and put a blanket on and then make like a pumpkin spice latte just to trick my brain to
Mhm.
think of fall. So how have you been doing that?
Kind of a little bit of the same, honestly. But so the spring and the summer articles were some of the hardest for me to write,
Mm.
because of the fact that I don't necessarily identify with those seasons. I am a fall
Oh.
person through and through. I love autumn. Autumn will always be my favorite season. I have some of my favorite memories from my childhood associated with fall. So fall into winter is going to be some of my favorite times. And we've talked about it before, how much I absolutely love Yuletide and Christmas. I
Oh,
love
big same.
exactly, we're so much on the same page with that. So it's I find it easier to write associated with the seasons that I love, and it's a lot more difficult for me to write for the seasons that I don't identify. That being said, to answer your question specifically in regards to spring and fall, spring became easy when I stopped trying to force myself to
Ooh,
write, because
yeah.
originally the main article that I was going to write for spring was about weaving. And just a little bit additional context for those that might be listening. I am a fiber artist. I like to crochet, I like to weave, I like to do a lot of things with fiber. So I was intending on writing an article that had to do with weaving. And I sat down and I started writing it and I started doing the research, and it didn't fit in my heart at that time to write. And then I had a conversation with somebody in regards to a situation when it came to being non-binary in the craft, and then a light bulb went off and was like, that's what I'm going to write about. Also too, because if you remember, the book review for spring was a book review for a book called Sacred Gender by
Yes. Yes.
Serpentine is the last name of the author. And that book is probably like one of the best resources that you could read as a practitioner who might be gender nonconforming, or who might be questioning a lot of things, or if you are working with somebody who's gender nonconforming and you have questions, it's a great
Mhm.
resource. So the book review was for that book, and that immediately like brought the flow into that article.
Oh,
And that's what made it easy when I stopped fighting myself to write what I thought I should write versus what my heart actually wanted me to write. It got better.
oh.
And then taking a little bit of a note out of like your workbook, I think at one point you had a list of like, I want to say like 15 different general topics. And I was like, that's such a good idea. Let me write down a whole bunch of generalized topics. So when it comes down to writing time, I can look through those, and then that will then make it easier. And then I started sitting down to write very simplistic outlines of like 4 or 5 of the topics I chose for the season. And then from there, I'd let my heart choose which ones I wanted to write about.
Also, I love your outlines and how structured you are. As like a side note, your spreadsheets get me motivated for the day.
Oh, I
So,
love it. I love it. It's because it makes doing an outline, and this goes for any kind of writing, for any kind of anything. Doing a very simple outline can be such a useful tool. It doesn't work for everybody because everybody's different, but for the most part, I will always suggest sitting down to do an outline. But and by outline, what I mean is you write the title, the generalized title of what you think you want to write. You write like so for us, because a lot of the time I reference some historical things, I will put history and then jot down a couple of sentences on what kind of history I want to talk about. And then I'll move into my opinion, and I'll jot down a couple of sentences of what I want my opinion to be. And then I'll put a closing, and then we'll do a closing. And for those of you, it might sound a lot like how your English teacher might have
uh,
given you directions to write in school, but there's a basis to that. It makes a lot of sense because I like to call it the Oreo cookie. You got, the top layer cookie, you got the cream in the middle, and then you got your bottom layer, you got a nice little sandwich,
oh my gosh,
You got to give
perfect.
yourself a perfect little sandwich for writing.
I
So,
love it because your articles come across that way too. They're just like the perfect sandwich to consume.
oh, stop.
Well,
You're fluffing me up.
hey man, I got to because you fluff me up so much outside of all of this stuff going on. Oh man, but I guess I can kind of relate to writing about topics of that you feel in your heart, and I also like the balance because spring and summer are like my times to shine. Like I
Hmm.
feel the best, and then during fall and winter, I'm like dead. I have no idea what's going on. So I love that balance between us.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, on that, I don't want to go too long on this podcast episode. Just kind of getting us back into the groove. I'm hoping that you and I can start making podcast episodes together more often.
Absolutely.
And with that, are you ready?
Yeah.
Good, because you're going.
Uh,
All right, I'll talk to y'all next week.
Bye, everyone.